Welcome to Stock Therapy with Penny Queen. Today I have CEO Fahar Merchant with Medicenna. They have just had fantastic results come out that showed 100% tumor regression in a pancreatic cancer patient and in a melanoma patient. They've also had durable response in other resistant cancers. So this is very exciting news, and I just want to have you on today to talk to investors about what's going on and everything that I think the market isn't interpreting right. So welcome to the show.
Thank you. Great to be here.
All right. So first off, how significant are these results?
Well, absolutely very exciting. I think the context here really, when you mentioned the complete regression of the patient with pancreatic cancer, that in of itself is a very substantial breakthrough, mainly because this particular patient had failed multiple lines of therapy, including Keytruda. Now, remember, Keytruda today is the world's biggest selling drug. It has annual sales of about 27 billion a year. And the patient had failed multiple chemotherapies, surgery, and finally Keytruda. And as the tumor was progressing in this patient, the patient entered the clinical trial with MDNA11 on its own. There was no combination. This was MDNA11 by itself. And we found at the first scan, the patient's tumor had shrank by about 25%, and then continued to shrink, and on it went until the tumor essentially completely disappeared. And believe it or not, this patient decided to actually go on vacation for 8 weeks. Unfortunately, when he came back, there was a new tumor that showed up. Patient very quickly got a single cycle of radiation and was back on MDNA11. And ever since then, not only the original tumors, but the new tumor that showed up, they all disappeared. And the patient has been without treatment now for just under 9 months, with no signs of the tumor coming back. So this is, as you know, pancreatic cancer is one of those most lethal cancers out there. IL-2 has never shown a response in pancreatic cancer. To see this is really overwhelming and really exciting. And therefore, when we subsequently saw a complete response in a patient with melanoma, just as exciting, but the context is different here because we've known the old, very toxic version of IL-2 known as Proleukin, which was approved some 30 years ago, did benefit melanoma patients. And there was a small percentage of patients that had long-term cures. And just to give you a bit of background here, if you look at all these immunotherapies that are being developed, IL-2 is unique in the sense that it has the potential of causing long-term cures, which is something that cannot be accomplished by other immunotherapies like checkpoint inhibitors. So this is very significant. So we're really excited to see, one, the pancreatic cancer patient that would not respond to checkpoint inhibitors and is now tumor-free. And the melanoma cancer patient now has been tumor-free for at least 6 months and is likely to be off therapy shortly. And this will be really exciting to see if the patient's tumor stays away for a prolonged period of time. And this is really, for us, really good news. So I'm really excited about the data.
All right. So I want to go over a couple things so that investors have a little more context. You already said Keytruda is a $27 billion a year treatment. But I kind of want to cover some of the licensing deals or acquisitions that were made in this space, because it's important that people understand how much money is involved in these, but also the points that it happened for these other companies. Because I know that the Nectar licensing agreement was at $3.6 billion, but they didn't have monotherapy results, right? They couldn't say that like our medication on its own can cause an improvement.
Exactly.
Fair statement? Okay, and then Synthorx was acquired by Sanofi for 2.5 billion, but just as phase 1 clinical trials were starting.
Correct.
Right. So it's fair to say that Medicenna is much farther ahead with much more promising results at this point.
Substantially better. I mean, it's not only the fact that both Nektar's drug called Bempeg and Synthorx's drug, neither of them was able to show single agent activity, meaning that their IL-2 drug on its own was not able to shrink tumors. And I think this is really important, not even getting a partial response. Now, what do I mean by a partial response? When a tumor shrinks by 30% or more, that is considered a partial response, okay? And they were not able to demonstrate that. And despite the fact they were not able to show that, they got acquired or entered into license agreements that were multi-billion dollars in value. So that is one really important thing as to where we are with Medicenna. With our data so far in a single agent setting, we are seeing 25, 30% response rates. Now you might say, well, 25, 30%, but remember one thing, Keytruda, the world's biggest selling drug, has response rates in first-line therapy of 30%. The remaining 70% of the patients don't respond to Keytruda, which is Merck's drug, or Opdivo, which is Bristol Myers' drug. And that's a $10 billion a year product as well. So you can see these mega blockbuster drugs are able to benefit only 30% of the patients. The remaining 70% don't benefit. And it is those patients that we are actually showing responses in. So that is a big deal here. So just imagine if MDNA11 was to be used in a first-line setting or in patients that were going to get Keytruda, but now we're going to get Keytruda and MDNA11, instead of 30%, we would hope that at that stage, in first-line patients, you might be able to get 40, 50, 60% response rates. So in a sense, the ability for MDNA11 to work in synergy with other checkpoint inhibitors is substantial. And it might become a prerequisite that every checkpoint inhibitor will need an IL-2 like MDNA11. And this is where we are excited because the data unquestionably are so much better than anything else out there in the IL-2 space. So we know, or we feel, that IL-2 is indeed best in class. It has shown safety. The efficacy is very impressive, despite the fact that all the patients that we have data on, that we've reported data on, are patients who have failed the checkpoint inhibitors that I talked to. In fact, about 70% of them failed 2 checkpoint inhibitors. So that's the sort of the excitement that we feel about this drug.
Okay. All right. You said something there that got me pretty excited. I heard you say first-line treatment. Is that a possibility, and is that a goal?
That is, and that should be the ultimate goal. And this is where we feel, remember, the patients that we are treating are really end-stage patients. They failed surgery, radiation, they failed multiple lines of chemotherapy. And as I mentioned, the data we've shared with you have been those patients that have failed immunotherapies, these checkpoint inhibitors. Now, these patients they don't have much options. They're not healthy. And I think the worst thing is that these patients, their immune system is really not healthy. And we are trying to, as you know, with MDNA11, the way it works is to boost the immune system and have the immune system trained so you can then go and attack the tumor. But just imagine if you were to go into earlier stage patients that have not received multiple lines of therapies, chemotherapies, etc. In a first-line setting, you're looking at a patient, yes, they have cancer, but generally they're healthier in the sense that their immune system has not been destroyed by radiation and chemo. And at this point, you are able to better leverage their immune system to your advantage and for the MDNA 11 to do a much better job. So this is where the ultimate end game has to be. But then to get into the clinic, to get the drug approved faster, get the drug, let's say, call it accelerated approval, those pathways are only open to end-stage patients. And that's how we would normally start, but intentionally, the long-term objective is to really get into first-line patients. And I think one thing I don't know if I mentioned this earlier, is that IL-2, as I said, was the one that was able to be curative, right? So if you go earlier on, you are improving the odds of patients having durable, where the tumor doesn't come back for years, if possible, a decade or two, and this will be fantastic. But that's the intent, is eventually get it first line.
All right. So just to reiterate and to make sure I've got this right, the patients that you have now are truly sick. Their immune systems have already been through a lot. But your belief is that if you're given patients that are healthy, except for the cancer, that you're likely going to see better results from them.
Exactly. They will be able to have the immune system work much more efficiently than the patients that we're treating today.
All right. So can you go into some of the other patient responses that you've had?
Yes.
I know this information's been coming out, but I'll say that the market doesn't seem to understand.
Yes. Okay. So let me share with you the data that we have first in patients that got MDNA 11 alone, right? So these are
monotherapy.
Monotherapy, correct.
11.
Exactly. And this is the, if you look at, in addition to the pancreatic cancer with complete regression of the tumor and the melanoma patient with, again, a complete response, we've had 3 additional patients. Another one, again, a pancreatic cancer patient. Now, this patient, again, monotherapy, but in this situation, the patient had failed checkpoints, another therapy prior to it, but also the patient is 86 years old and very frail patients with pancreatic cancer where the tumor had spread to the small bowel. So initially we had reported that the patient had small bowel cancer, but subsequently they thought the tumor had spread to the pancreas, but in fact it was the other way around. The tumor was in the pancreas, but it spread to the small bowel. So this was again a pancreatic cancer patient. So 2 patients with pancreatic cancer, both of them responses, 2 out of 2, right? This is really exciting, right? So that's the and then we have had 2 additional patients with melanoma that have also had partial responses. So in total, we've had 5 patients that have responded out of 20, 2 of them being pancreatic cancer patients and 3 being melanoma patients. So this is really getting us to the 25%, 30% response rates in patients who have failed, including 2 out of 2 pancreatic cancer patients. So that's where we are with the monotherapy. And of course, we'll be generating more data, enrolling more patients. I think really excited to bring in more patients with a biomarker, which is known as MSI high, okay? So MSI high is a biomarker where Keytruda is approved. There are about 30 different types of tumors that have this MSI high biomarker, and they respond to Keytruda. But eventually, the tumors come back, or the other half that does not respond have no options. So we are seeing a really exciting data set already in pancreatic cancer. We are hoping to enroll at least under half a dozen, maybe a dozen patients with MSI high tumors and see if MDNA 11 can get this kind of responses. So really excited about that potential there, in addition to melanoma, of course. Okay.
Wow. Okay. So, well, let's talk a little bit about the stock market. I know it's not typically the favorite subject for CEOs, especially in such a, when you're dealing with real life and we're talking about the market, which is finicky at best, doesn't tend to understand results. Last week, RFK Jr. was announced to basically lead Nation's Health as a potential cabinet member, and there was a massive panic across biotech.
Right.
What do you think about that? Because my read was that actually sounds like good news for Medicenna.
It's good news not only for Medicenna, but all small biotech companies, really. Because in the end, remember one thing is that from a regulatory perspective, we have to deal with incredible challenges that big pharma is able to handle, right? Because they have the resources, they have the ability to deal with the bureaucracies, etc. And for small biotechs, I think, if you look at what his mandate is to really make it efficient, and he wants drugs and therapies to be approved based on evidence. Evidence is the key thing here. And I think if you look at our website, it actually says that our focus is really evidence-based medicine. And this is where I'm really excited about, because my expectation is that in the coming years, it will be so much more affordable, so much more better for smaller biotechs that are trying to struggle to get drugs into the marketplace. I think it'll make it so much more sensible and easier. So I see it as really good news. So I'm disappointed that the markets reacted the way they did.
That's all right. I mean, the bottom line is every time people make emotional, impulsive sells, they create opportunity for people who are paying attention to the facts.
Yes.
And that's, the last news release that you came out, I saw that information and I thought this should have been a doubling of your market cap right here. Like we're talking pancreatic cancer. I think most people understand just how deadly it is and just how hard it is to make any progress. That was massive news. And I felt like it must have just gone over the heads of investors because they weren't seeing the scope. They weren't seeing the importance. So I'm a fan. Like I hate to say it, but I like it when other people make poor financial decisions because they transfer more opportunity into my pocket. But it's really irritating when it comes down to it. So why do you think retail didn't see the significance of your last results?
I think it was an expectation that was unrealistic with respect to the fact that we had data in a combination setting and seeing a response rate of 20%, meaning 1 out of 5 patients responding to treatment, okay? They felt it was not good enough. And the key thing here is, remember, it's a phase 1 portion of the combination part of the trial. At this stage of the trial, we are opening the therapy to all type of tumors, irrespective whether they will respond to checkpoint inhibitors or not, whether checkpoint inhibitors like Kuda or Opdivo have been approved for those therapies or not. The purpose is to establish a safe dose. For instance, if I go back to MDNA11 when it was being used on its own, monotherapy setting, we were not expecting the pancreatic cancer patient to respond, but we just, said it's a safety study. Let's bring that patient in. And voila, there it was, the patient responded. So same thing here in the combination. We sort of keep it open because we never know what surprises we might see. And this is where I think this message got lost. The patient that responded was a patient with colon cancer, okay? Patient with a biomarker known as MSS, okay? Now, let me go back a little bit here with colon cancer. Colon cancer is the 3rd most frequent cause of death due to cancer, okay?
And rapidly rising in
100
prevalence.
Yeah, 150,000 patients are diagnosed with colon cancer every year in North America. Of those, 85% are MSS, okay? MSS tumors, meaning that Keytruda is not approved for those patients. Or for that matter, any other checkpoint inhibitor is not approved. For us to see that Keytruda together with MDNA11 that patient responded, it really opens up. I know it's only one patient, but it really opens up an opportunity, which is a huge opportunity in patients that have tumors that are MSS tumors, that are highly resistant to checkpoint inhibitors. And therefore, it's an eye-opener for us and saying, wow, this could potentially be used for these challenging tumor types where Keytruda or checkpoints don't work or have not been approved. And this is what we see in this dose escalation part of the study. We get patients with all kinds of tumors. We bring them in because we're looking at safety, and surprisingly, we see a response in this patient. So this is excitement because suddenly, let's look at it this way. For drugs that are, for checkpoint inhibitors that are not approved for some tumor types, combining with MDNA11 might suddenly open that opportunity up and help the patients that currently don't have any options. So that's the key thing here, okay? And I think that's what got lost in the message. The focus was on only 1 out of 5 patients responded, but those 5 patients were not, most of them not eligible for checkpoint inhibitors. And it is a dose escalation portion of the study. We have not optimized the dose. What's the best dose to combine with Keytruda? So that's really important. And finally, that message did not go through is also the fact that Keytruda has or checkpoint inhibitors in general have side effects, as does MDNA11. When you combine the two together, you would expect that the two together might have even worse side effects. It did not happen. So this is really important because now it allows us to say we can safely combine a checkpoint inhibitor, whether it's Keytruda or Opdivo or Tecentriq or whatever it is, with MDNA11, and the chances for new additive or new safety issues are unlikely to occur. So those are the 2 key messages. Safety of combining the drug, but more importantly, discovering that MDNA11 with Keytruda is able to potentially treat patients with tumors where checkpoints are not approved. And that opens up a big market.
All right. Well, I am really excited to hear all of that, even though it's knocked my ego down a bit, because a lot of that was lost on me too. You know, I was looking at the results as being fantastic, just without keeping in my mind that we're just talking about safety here.
Okay.
So, and not realizing that there was the inclusion of people who you wouldn't expect would, you know, if checkpoint inhibitors aren't the best route for them anyways, you know.
Right.
So in that context, the results are even better than they.
Correct. And this is what's because we've opened up the combination part of the study to different tumor types. There are a lot of patients that are coming into the study because they know they cannot get Keytruda. Keytruda has not been approved for them. And here is an opportunity for them to test this combination, saying maybe this combo might work, even though it's not been approved for my tumor. Perhaps this combination might do the trick. So it's sort of allowing patients to explore this opportunity, considering that patients have no option, no possibility of getting a checkpoint inhibitor. And they're getting a checkpoint inhibitor in this trial.
That makes me even more excited.
It does. And just to give you another bit of information is that we are continuing with the enrollment of patients with checkpoint inhibitors. Now with MDNA11's dose has gone up to 120 micrograms per kilogram, which is higher than what we use in our monotherapy. And we've also administering MDNA11 every 3 weeks instead of every 2 weeks. So it makes it much more convenient for the patient. So those are the two additional aspects of the trial. And even in a monotherapy setting, we are evaluating MDNA11 at 120 micrograms, but every 3 weeks. So this is generally, and the good news is this, that all those arms, all those groups have already been fully enrolled. In fact, we have a waiting list of patients wanting to get into the study. So we are hoping that we'll have plenty of data, particularly in the combination setting, in the first and second quarter of next year.
All right, so for the purpose of this video, I want to keep things more about the results and not how everything actually works and the fine details on your technology. But I want to remind everyone who's watching that if you go back through my videos, maybe a year and a half ago, there are 2 deep dives that really go into the mechanics of the drugs. But I do have a couple more questions for you, so this is a basic gist that a lot of the patients that you have are in the trial because they are getting their Keytruda for free, right? That Keytruda is coming to you for this trial free of cost to the company, right?
Correct, yes.
Okay, so as a a partnership, a research partnership of sorts. So some of these patients who would not be eligible to get the medication at all have enrolled, and you've seen results.
Correct, yes. So, and why are we using Keytruda? I think that's really important, right? Or for that matter, any other checkpoint inhibitor. Remember, there's about half a dozen companies that have approved checkpoint inhibitors just like Keytruda. And what we're doing with MDNA11 is really stimulating the cancer-fighting immune cells. And eventually they get tired. We call them exhausted, okay? What Keytruda and checkpoint inhibitors do is prevent exhaustion.
Okay.
So the two things work really nicely together because on the one hand, you're recruiting with MDNA11 and you're stimulating the cancer cell or the immune cells to fight the cancer. And in order for it, so that we are able to prevent these immune cells from getting exhausted, we use a drug like Keytruda, so that immune cells are able to keep on fighting the cancer for a prolonged period of time. So that's what we are seeing. Okay.
Okay.
That's
That makes sense.
That's why we are combining the two together. That's sort of so logical. It's sort of a 1-2 step. You got to have the first one in order for the second one to work. So let's say if you were to use Keytruda on its own, okay, it stops the immune cells from getting exhausted. But where are you getting the immune cells from? You don't have enough immune cells. You don't have enough of the soldiers to fight the tumor, right? And that's where IL-2 comes in, where MDNA11 comes in and says, we're going to recruit, we are going to build a bigger fighting force, we're going to have more soldiers out there. And Keytruda is going to come in there and say, we're going to make sure that those soldiers don't get tired. So that's sort of an ideal combo, okay? And that's why patients and doctors that treat these patients know the story. They know why it will work. They know why there's a better chance for the drug to help these patients. Of course, ideally, you want to go first line. But in the absence of first line, at least you can do this at point. Let me say another thing. I think this is really important. We talked about first line. What about before first line? Okay. Patients always get surgery. All right. And after surgery, the tumor is removed, the tumor comes back, they get their chemos and radiation, et cetera, et cetera. But what is really very exciting is what we're saying is, if we treat the patient, sorry, this is in a mouse model. So I'm not talking about a patient, but we took a sort of a mouse model with a very aggressive breast cancer, okay? And these mice were implanted with the tumor in the breast of these mice. And these tumors grow very rapidly. We treated these mice with just one dose of MDNA11, and a week later took the tumor out, okay? And we waited to see if the tumor is coming back, and it did not come back. So we said, maybe we should inject more tumor in these patients. So we injected more of the breast cancer in these mice. And those tumors were simply not able to grow. We tried it again, and still those tumors were not able to grow. What does that say? It says that the immune system has now been educated by MDNA11 that was given only once. And the immune system is able to recognize, oh, remember we got rid of that tumor. We have to make sure that that tumor comes back. We're going to fight it off. So it generates these immune cells, or the soldiers, that have now memory, and they can recognize the enemy when it comes back and deal with it. So, this is another big potential here with MDNA11. Is not only first line, but before first line, so that it's easier for the surgeon to remove the tumor, right? Or in some cases, avoid surgery altogether, because whenever you're dealing with certain tumor types, colon cancer, rectal cancer, I mean, the quality of life of these patients when you surgically remove those tumors, it's terrible, okay? But if you're able to do this with a drug like MDNA11, that's fantastic. And we've shown that, and we presented some of those data at SITC. So this is preclinical, but this is where the industry is heading. The industry is moving from first line to what we call neoadjuvant, meaning before surgery. As soon as the tumor is detected, treat the tumor and then surgically remove it, not the other way around.
Do you think that there's any possibility that therapies could be used, thinking just as a immune system training system? Like, I mean, we know the amount of cancer, like the odds of any individual getting cancer at some point in their life. Is there a like a potential for a preventative?
That's a long way to go. But I'd say the first step to get there is to train the immune system when the tumor shows up, okay? And when the tumor first shows up, you train the immune system so that it's ready, so that if the tumor comes back again, it's ready to fight, okay? That's the best way.
Okay, I would like to point out that you didn't say, no, you're wrong. You said that that's a big jump, and that's fine. Wow, that's just really, really impressive results. I am excited to see, what happens through the rest of the year.
Yes.
What opportunities do you think you might have for data readouts or for conferences?
Yes, so as I said, we have 3 opportunities coming up. February is the inaugural meeting of immuno-oncology, which is the AACR meeting coming up in mid-February. And then mid-April is this big global conference, the AACR conference coming up. And then the third one is early in June. So this is the big conference called ASCO that's coming up as well. So there are 3 opportunities between now and early June for us to present data, and we will be seeking to submit our abstracts. And as soon as we get accepted, we'll announce those.
Perfect. Yeah, I couldn't be more excited about the progress that you've made, but also I'm really anticipating seeing more, and I can't help it. I just want to see the the sequel, and then the third installment. So we know that RA Capital invested about $20 million, and there are other institutional investors. So how do you think your institutional investors feel about your data?
They are certainly very encouraged with the data so far. I think it's safe to say that the data, particularly around the pancreatic cancer patient and the MSI high patient in general, that's really exciting, because there's an opportunity here where MDNA11 could be used And hopefully, in patients that don't respond to checkpoint inhibitors, MDNA11 could be used and potentially get accelerated approval based on a phase 2 clinical trial. Okay. Because that makes this drug or this particular indication an orphan indication. Patients would have failed a checkpoint inhibitor. Okay. And having failed a checkpoint inhibitor, for them to then respond to MDNA11. Remember, we've treated 3 MSI high patients so far, and of those, 2 have responded. So this is really exciting. And these patients had failed checkpoint inhibitors as well. So this is where there is the sort of the immediate, I would say, the immediate near-term excitement that comes along, and the potential to advance this program into other tumor types, particularly in the combination setting. And I think safe to say again that to seeing a response in an MSS tumor type, which is something that does not show up, does not demonstrate response with other checkpoint inhibitors, is another new but very big outcome for institutional investors. So I think these are the 2 sets of data that we were not expecting, neither were they expecting to see this kind of responses. And I think it's generally a really good omen to see this kind of data so early on.
All right, so let's talk money. It looks like you have a cash runway good through mid 2026. Is that correct?
Correct, yes.
Okay, do you think that's enough for you to achieve your milestones?
What it will get us the key data readouts well before that. So in a sense, it will provide us an opportunity if we have to transact or look at other opportunities down the road. The great thing about the data readouts coming up in the first 2 quarters will get us to the key data readouts, and that is well before the cash out date. And I think this will put us in a much better position middle of next year to look at transactions, have discussions with strategic partners, potential collaborators, potential licensors, etc. So lots of new things that might come out as a result of the data we have as they mature in the first and second quarter of next year.
All right. Perfect. I one of my favorite words is transaction. So yeah. I like talking about those. So with MDNA being tested in combination with Keytruda, do you think that it's likely that Medicenna could secure a collaboration or licensing deal with Merck or any other major players?
Yes, well, as you know, we have this clinical collaboration with Merck, where Merck provides us with Keytruda at no cost. And at the same time, Merck is part of our joint development committee, so they get an opportunity to review the data, the safety, etc. So yes, they get a front row seat to the data. But our collaboration with Merck is not that it's exclusive. We can transact with any other company that has a checkpoint inhibitor. So in a sense, I would not restrict any potential transaction that occurs to just Merck. It is potentially open. We have no restrictions. There's no exclusivity arrangement here. So it could open up multiple opportunities.
Well, you know exactly what I want to hear. All right, so I just want to make sure that any investors out there that are listening to this understand that I'm not paid by the company and I am a long investor in Medicenna, but I believe the company to be highly undervalued. So I want people to take a look at all the transactions that have happened in this space that were done earlier stage without results. And remember that, right now we're talking about safety and early efficacy. So for me, I've been watching this company invested for, I believe, over 2 years at this point. And I took the opportunity earlier in the year when the market was being very irrational to triple down on my position. And I am happy to hold here, watching the results that are coming out. For me, unexpectedly more positive than I had even hoped for. And this is such a big market. It's something that affects all of us directly at some point in our lives. So keep watching. And when these news releases come out, I want you to actually look at them and try and understand what's being said. And if you have questions, send them to the company and make sure you're staying on top of it, because I have a feeling that anybody who's honestly understanding what's going on here would be watching this very, very carefully. And so thank you for your time. Dr. Merchant, thank you as well for being here and for answering all of these investor questions.
Happy to do so. It was a pleasure. Look forward to catching up again as we get more data in the coming quarters.
All right, I am excited too, and I can't wait for the next bit of data to come out.
Thank you very much. It was great talking to you. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.